Hey, cool dude, can I play too?
It's only a one-player game.
Then how come it says second player score?
You're listening to the Second Player Speaks podcast with Nerdpunk's Second Player Score.
All right. So this is the second episode of Second Player Speaks, the official Second Player Score podcast. I'm Brian. I'm the guitar player and singer for Second Player Score, and we have with us Kyle and Dan, the guys in the band. And we played a show last night at the Eastside Bar and Grill. So this is kind of the hungover, lack of sleep edition of Second Player Speaks. But it was a kind of a punk showcase, and we were one of 6 punk bands. There was Gumnut and Matt Danger and Beat on Brats and Six Sundays and Bastard Salt, and we were and us, and it was a fun night. It was a good time, and you know what struck me was that each of the bands had really kind of their own individual style of punk. And that got me to kind of thinking about a question that comes up in my mind every so often is like, you know, what is punk actually? Like, you know, we brand ourselves, we call ourselves nerd punk. You know, but you know, punk is kind of it's a wide ranging term. It can kind of encompass a lot of different things. So, you know, I kind of wanted to pose that question today, which is, you know, what is punk anyway? Is it a sound? Is it a look? Is it a attitude? You know what? So.
I heard you mention something about this last night while we were at the show, and I've been thinking about it ever since. And it does seem to be very specific to the bands. In one band, it might be the attitude. In another band, it may be just the sound. But yeah, I mean, trying to nail it down, punk is so wide-ranging. And like, you listen to the punk of the 80s, and then you listen to what, let's say, like the pop punk bands like Neck Deep and stuff today. It's so vastly different, but it still all kind of falls under the same umbrella. I think whereas like in the 80s, it was a lot of angst and anger about, politics. Now, today you have bands, you know, like the Blink-182s and the Neck Deeps and all that. It's all angst and anger about like relationships and stuff. So it's kind of like the topic maybe has changed, but one of the prevailing themes seems to be anger and angst about something.
Yeah. Like even in the happier pop punk kind of sounds, or.
No, and that was something I thought about last night, and I didn't get too far on that spectrum of it. And I don't know really. I did not come up with any like common theme in there with that. I mean, I guess, you know, not everything has to be angst and sadness, but I don't know what makes necessarily that part of it punk. I mean, the angst and the anger that's easy. I mean, that's just inherent.
You know, one thing that I kind of was thinking about though is that to me, like the punk sound or the punk vibe seems to encompass a wide range of emotion, like as compared to metal, which I'm not putting metal down because I mean I'm an original metalhead. That's the kind of music I grew up on.
Same here.
That's what got me into, you know, playing guitar in the first place was metal. But
I think we all were metalheads at one point.
Right. But it seems like, you know, for the most part, you know, metal is all angry. Like it's just, you know, like it's like 99% angry. Whereas punk, I think you have like, you know, a lot of it is angry, but some of it is kind of, you know, happy, and some of it is kind of, it's a wider range of emotions is kind of what I see coming from the sound. And so that's what makes punk kind of a little bit harder to define. I guess a little harder to nail down because you have a wider range, I think, in there.
Right.
So.
Yeah. So, I mean, I guess maybe like, is there a common theme for all these different flavors of punk? And I mean, I don't know. I mean, it's so far ranging. It is hard to find. Is there one common thread? Right. I mean, obviously, you know, emotions, no matter what emotions they may be, they're very strongly convicted in punk. But I mean, that could be for so many different styles of music. So I don't know if that's not necessarily exclusive to punk.
Right.
So yeah, it is really hard to say what defines something as punk.
What do you think?
Well, there's punk is, to me, it's kind of like a delivery system of whatever message or whatever you want to represent. It's kind of like they have the same, well, music wise, it's kind of like they have the same 4 chords maybe, or it doesn't have to be super fast or super slow. So you can break down the music, but that's kind of like rock songs sped up is punk to me. So, I mean, it's more about representing what, whatever opinions you have, what messages you have. Like we're nerd punk, right? So we try to bring in things geeky things that we like and incorporate it into our music or incorporate it into our videos, that kind of stuff, to help draw in hey, this is what we like. We're not ashamed of it. To me, that's punk rock.
Yeah, no, and that's a good point, and that's why I think too. It's almost an ethos. It's a, the whole do-it-yourself kind of thing. For us, I think, the fact that we're all kind of we're kind of self-produced, and I think that whole mentality of just being taking ownership of your own stuff and doing what doing things on your own, with Epitaph Records, that. Once the Offspring broke big and they were making millions of dollars, I remember people Brett Gurewitz, the guitar player from Bad Religion and the owner of Epitaph, people were telling him, "Oh, you're not punk rock anymore because now you're rich." Hey, we built this all on our own. This is an independent label. The Offspring is a band on our label that we just built this from scratch. I can't think of anything more punk rock than that. That we made this into $1 million label just on our own, and that's an attitude, that's an ethos, and I kind of I think that's very punk.
True. No, that is about as punk as it gets. Is that you did it outside of the system? Damn the man,
right?
Kind of shit.
Yeah.
I mean, no, I mean that really is. I mean, I think that without a doubt can be a common theme through most all punk, is that it's just unapologetic. And definitely the DIY thing, and we're doing it our way, not the system's way. So yeah, I really you've told me that story about Epitaph before, and I definitely love that story. That is a great punk rock history.
Yeah. So he didn't allow people to define him as being not punk just because they're successful. In fact, their success is really what made them, punk.
Yeah.
Is
and
really
the
what he's
people
trying to
telling
say.
them, "Hey, you're not punk because you're successful," are the people that supported them and bought their albums. So it's you gave me your money, and now you're telling me I'm not punk rock because I took your money.
Right.
I'm what?
Exactly. Yeah.
That doesn't make sense.
So yeah, and one thing I find interesting is as far as punk being a sound. It's like we were saying, it encompasses a lot of different kinds of styles. As we saw last night at our show, and it's kind of cool that it can be all these different things, and still I love Six Sundays was one of the bands last night, and they play. I think they called themselves Dad Punk.
Yeah, they were the dad band.
That was,
and they repped it. They weren't afraid of it. They were like, "Yeah, this is me."
That was. I just thought that was. They had a sound that was kind of like Dead Milkman-ish, which is, probably very different from us and from the other bands, but it was still their own individual style of that. And so it's cool that I think punk is you can be what you want to be. Basically, you can do what you want. You can just be an individual. And just kind of go, just do your own thing. So
I love the way they started out their set last night too, to try to really solidify the dad band thing. They literally went up there, started talking like they were a dad band, made it sound like they were going to be playing some classic rock covers.
Right.
And hey, we're going to, so we'll start this one off with some John Mellencamp.
And they actually did.
And they literally did. But then they did it just long enough for you to go, holy shit, these guys might really not be a punk band. Oh my God, what is going on? And then all of a sudden the song just morphed into this like just hard hitting punk rock song. And I mean, it wasn't like they stopped and started. It literally just transitioned into it perfectly.
Right,
and I was like, oh, okay, all right. This is better.
Yeah,
So I'm like, I played these guys on my radio show before, and it was punk as fuck. I don't understand what is going on
What
here.
is happening?
Yeah.
But no, I thought that was really cool. So, all right, I think that's it for the music segment of our episode, and so we're gonna move on into the pop culture part. Earlier this week, I think Dan, you had posted something about Pac-Man arcade game.
I saw in Costco they're selling these like mini arcade cabinets. It was like, I think it's like $350 or something like that. But there's like 3 games in there, and you actually stand up, and then it looks like a small mini coin op kind of console. And I'm like, oh my God, I need to have this, but I don't have $350 to drop, and I don't have floor space. But damn,
Right. So when we saw that, when Kyle and I had met for midweek practice, we were talking about classic arcade games, and we got into this whole thing about what was our favorite classic arcade games, and I think what was yours? You meant Tempest.
I want, the perfect for me would be like if they had Tempest and Tron, maybe Galaga. Do you know they just released? Arcade One just released a Star Wars. It's got three different Star Wars arcade games. That also. I think I would need that, and if they had like a Tempest, Tron, maybe Galaga combination. Oh my God,
that would be irresistible, right?
Yeah, I'd have to go like rob a bank or something. Yeah, I don't know, but I would be finding a way. Like I would be going into the freezer and getting the ice block out and chipping out the fucking credit card.
There you go.
Like, dude, I have to have it.
And so like I remember my favorite games being, and it's interesting because like, all right, so we. When I was in high school, a group of us, we used to go to the arcade Fun Factory. I don't know if you remember Fun Factory.
I remember Fun Factory.
And
I still have the coins.
Do you really?
I found one
shit.
when I was moving boxes. Like, holy crap! I know
That's
these ridges.
amazing.
I know these little ridges. And like, crap, it's a coin.
Yeah. So so that used to be a weekly thing. We go to, or was it more than a week? I don't know, maybe several times a week in the summer. But we used to go there and we used to hang out. And the thing is, this is not. I'm not saying this as a sob story or anything, but I didn't have as much money to spend as the other guys that I was hanging around with. So while they had like, a $20 bill to blow that night or whatever, I had, maybe like $1 or sometimes less. And so I had to kind of learn out from necessity how to make that dollar stretch for the whole night that we were there, which is like several hours.
Wow.
So I ended up, looking for a game that I could get really good at, so I could just make that last. And so what that ended up being was Mat Mania. I don't know if you guys remember. Mat Mania is a wrestling game.
Yes.
Which was not necessarily like my favorite game per se, but it was like I was strangely good at it. So I could just sit there for hours and just I flipped the score. And I would draw a crowd. And people would be like, "Hey, this little kid is good at this wrestling game." It's like, I don't know. I didn't necessarily like it as much as maybe other games, but I was good at it, and that enabled me to be able to last the whole night on a quarter or two, and while the other guys were off spending all their money. So that was one of my favorite. I also I liked Dragon's Lair, but I was terrible at it. But that game was really hard.
Oh yeah.
Space Ace was easier. I actually finished Space Ace, but I think the makers of those games, they realized how freaking hard Dragon's Lair was, so they kind of eased up when they made Space Ace. It was a little easier. So that was another one of my favorites. But
but weren't you like a Pac-Man wizard or something?
Okay, yeah, Super Pac-Man. That was my jam. It didn't it doesn't last as long necessarily as like Mat Mania. I could just play for hours. But Super Pac-Man. I actually entered a contest and I won like second place or something like that.
Still, that's pretty damn
And
good.
yeah, so those I would say those games, Matt Mania, Super Pac-Man, Space Ace, those were the games that I were the good at. I think Super Pac-Man was kind of the convergence of a game that I enjoyed and I was good at. So there you go.
Yeah, like I always gravitated towards the co-op kind of games, or like the 4-player Simpsons, or like I think it was like 6-player X-Men, or like the Turtles in Time, where you have 4 people just button mashing and you're all trying to achieve a common goal.
Oh yeah.
But you're just dropping like flies and you're like pumping in quarters and you're like, oh, I'm out. But to keep the score going, your buddy taps in and he starts dumping his quarters in there. And you're like, okay,
Right.
let's go. And
So did you play this with friends? You guys would hang out?
Oh yeah, a
and do
bunch
that
of
and-
us. Like
yeah.
it was it was at Fun Factory. And then, well, in high school, Column Mall was a lot closer, so it was the bowling alley.
Mm-hmm.
And then they got like a couple Time Crisis games where you're shooting things, and there's one Point Blank. It was where you shoot the screen, but you're not killing bad guys. It's more like skill. Like they're like a leaf in the wind will be going across the screen. You got one shot to nail it, kind of thing.
Yeah.
So, so those are pretty classic for me.
Cool.
A lot of button mashers where it's not like the Mortal Kombat where people would just watch behind like, oh my god, this guy's murdering this dude, and then you just lose your money and you're like, you just feel bad because he shamed you in front of everybody.
Right.
So the co-op was more like a camaraderie sort of thing, and it kind of gets crazy when you have your friends trying to like get you to the last level, and you're like, oh, I gotta go break change, and you run into McDonald's to get like you break your $5 bill and you run back out, and like they're still going like, okay, great.
Yeah. Cool. That sounds like fun. But
Oh yeah, it was a lot of fun. I saw those games also at Ground Control. So we're gonna have to make a trip down there fairly soon.
Yeah. We have to do that. We'll do an on-site podcast with.
Yeah, there's a place called Vault 31 here in Vancouver too that Dan was Sam was telling me about.
Oh, cool.
So we're gonna have to go down there. It's like a retro gaming like bar.
Ah,
Oh, hell yeah.
So yeah,
Most
I think we
definitely.
definitely need to make some sort of a field trip there. I know Bobby wants to go. Sam wants to go. I'm sure, So we'll definitely have to do a little road trip and check that all out. 'Cause
Excellent.
That place sounds pretty cool.
Yeah. What was there any games that you guys that you liked, but you just you just weren't any good at, no matter how much you tried? Like for me, that was Joust. Like that when that came out, that was like super popular, and it was like everybody was blown away by the the graphics at the time, but it was like, oh, this is so cool, but I tried to get into it, but I was just never good at it, and I quickly learned to move away from that. So
I think most of them. I was like, I love video games, but I was really never much of a master at any of them because I just wasn't.
nerd card revoked.
I mean, like I said, I had some of my favorites, but most of them were just games I just played that I liked, but I knew they weren't going to last long.
Gotcha.
I think the one that if there was one that I really wanted to be much better at and just never got good at was Punch Out.
Yeah.
I got good with it on like the Nintendo, like the Super Nintendo. Like I figured that out, but I did not do very well in the arcade with it. And I think some of it I had a real hard time with was the fact that they were predictable. And for me, for whatever reason, I didn't like that. I was like, oh, so this is just memorization. It's not actual skill. It's the skill of memorization. And that kind of ruined a little bit of it for me. So I don't know. Somewhere in my head, I thought that if I played it differently, I guess maybe I thought that it would make a difference. But no, it just meant I died faster.
Gotcha.
Because I refused to memorize all the patterns.
Right.
So that's the only way I finally gave in on the Super Nintendo and Mike Tyson Punch Out, and I memorized the all the patterns and stuff, so I could finally defeat Mike Tyson.
Nice. Like for me, it was all the fighting games. I mean, like you pay 50 cents for one life, you get 2 rounds, and then you got to pump in another 50 cents to go to the next round if you're fighting another person.
Mm-hmm.
And that just kind of kills it for me. But it's like you need to memorize all those things. But like how Kyle was saying, once it became a home console, then I can just sit there at my leisure, remember like, oh yeah, this is how you do a Hadouken and all this kind of stuff. Or like, okay, then you can fight the computer. But then it's totally different once you're fighting a person.
Right.
Like it's not an AI. It's someone that thinks. It's someone that changes everything up.
Yeah.
And like if I had like an arcade that had infinite coins, maybe that would be a little different. We just sit there and fight all day.
That reminds me of High Score Girl, the anime. Did you watch any more?
Oh yeah,
of that?
the whole thing.
The whole thing.
Like I was surprised that they brought out the Street Fighter that had one giant button, and like to do a strong hit, you had to hit it hard.
Yeah.
Or if you want to do a bunch of light taps, yeah, that's great.
That show is so good.
I actually have to say I do have one that I really truly wanted to get really good at. It's a much older game, Wizard of War.
Oh yeah,
dude, I loved that game.
That was a good game.
I still love that game to this day. I love all the sounds, everything. I love that game. I love to just watch it. But yeah, that was one I really wanted to get better at, and I only got so good. No matter how hard I tried, I did okay, but
it was a hard game.
And I could just never get to the much higher levels that I saw other people getting to. But damn, I loved some Wizard of War, man. That was one of the coolest games, especially for the time frame that it came out in. I mean, it was definitely like the game to play for a while there.
Yeah, I remember that. That was a good one. All right, so we're moving on to the final third of the episode, in which we talk about beer. Beer.
Yum.
So the beer of the day is I have a bottle of it in my fridge. So I'm gonna go get it. It's a stout. It's a Dragonstooth Stout by Elysian, which is a brewery, I guess, up in Seattle.
Oh,
yes.
Kyle, I'm sure you're familiar with.
Yeah. I've had Elysian many times.
So while I go get that, so we can all sample it, maybe talk about Elysian or stouts, or what goes into a stout, what makes a good stout, and I'll be right back.
Well, it is coming close on to stout season, which I will be making one soon.
There's a season for stouts.
Well, yeah, you want, your heavier beers are going to be, in the colder months. How, okay, so we talked about mouthfeel last week.
Oh, yeah.
The stouts are what give you that real creamy kind of mouthfeel.
Oh, okay.
Right?
Okay.
So, but you don't want that when it's 100 degrees out, right?
Yeah,
it's kind of like, it's like trying to drink milk on a hot day.
Oh, dude.
Ugh.
Oh.
Right?
No.
So, you have your crisper, cleaner beers, like your IPAs and stuff. So, but when it's cold outside, man, you want your creamier beers, the heavier beers at that point.
Oh, okay. I'm starting to get this. So this isn't something you would want to mow your yard with, kind of thing.
No. I mean, okay. If that's all I had, it's not like I'm not going to drink this stout because it's hot out. What it means is that if I have a choice, I'm going to pick an IPA or a pale ale or a wheat beer on a hot day. But if all I got in the fridge is stout, it's better than not beer. So
Gotcha.
What's different about brewing a stout as compared to brewing like an IPA or something? Or
well, you're looking for a more roasty flavor, so you use a lot of really darker malts. I know for me, I use malts that are they're just black, but it gives you that roasty coffee flavor, and then of course you want to get that mouthfeel. So I use either a flaked barley or some oatmeal.
Mouthfeel, which we learned about last week.
Exactly.
Yep.
And so
this is an educational podcast
because you want to get those proteins that will give you that creamy mouthfeel, that creamy texture to the beer.
Gotcha.
So it's just it's more heavy, it's more satisfying. It's more what you want when it's cold outside.
Right.
You want something a little more robust and a stout is what it is. I mean, that's why it's a stout.
Right.
It just comes out and like punches you in the face.
Have you guys had this one before? This is like I usually drink, like the session IPAs throughout the week, and then like on the weekend, like when I have pizza night with my kids or whatever, like I'll get one of these, and that'll be my the beer that I drink with
so
the
this
pizza.
is your pizza beer.
This is
then?
my pizza beer. Yeah, it really
I don't think
kind
I've
of
had
goes
this.
good with that. Have you guys had this?
I
one?
have
No, I
not
don't think
had
so.
this before, and I find it interesting because I'm looking at it, and as I swirl it and watch the head lace down the sides, it looks very much like Bone Storm Imperial Stout.
It does. That it does.
The one that went to 11.
Yeah.
Yes.
This one it's like a 8. I think it's an 8%ish.
This does not taste
Yeah.
8%.
And that's also kind of typical of a stout, is they do tend to be higher alcohol content, but that's not necessarily mandatory. I mean, I know of places that make great stouts, and they're only around 6%.
Or even like Guinness is a stout, right? And Guinness is a
Yeah. Guinness is basically like drinking a Pabst. I mean, it's not high alcohol content,
Right.
but it's got that just really robust, roasty flavor to it. And
Okay.
it's so good. There is one difference there, and now I don't know if this is true. I've heard that there is a huge difference between what you get here in the States and what you get over there in Ireland, and I've heard it many times. I've never actually been to Ireland, so I don't know. Hope to be. I'd definitely like to try some Guinness that's brewed over there.
Oh, yeah.
Because I hear that it's definitely more. I don't know. It's just more when you're over there. So I'm sure, like here, for a stout, it doesn't have quite the mouthfeel you expect. It's a little thinner than what you expect to get out of a stout. But all the other qualities are there, and it's one of my favorite beers because it's so powerful in flavor, but you don't have to be like thinking about, wow, I've already had one. Man, maybe I better be a little careful with this next one,
Right,
because I still have to drive.
Right.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
it's just like drinking a Pabst. I mean, it's no big deal. It's not all that alcohol.
Well, I heard like Guinness is one of like the healthiest beers.
I don't know if they still do it, but I know that doctors over in Ireland used to prescribe it for pregnant mothers.
Oh no, pregnant
Yes.
moms?
Yes, they would prescribe it to
That's
pregnant
the Irish.
mothers
Wow.
because I don't remember specifically, but there was something of the nutrition in the beer that was actually like really good. And if they didn't drink, too much of it, that the alcohol was, it was the amount that they were drinking was low enough that it wasn't considered a problem.
I did not know this.
Yeah.
I learned something
Yep.
today.
So like, here's a booster shot. Drink a Guinness.
Yeah.
That's like V8 over there.
Yeah.
Nice.
So
Wow.
Yeah, crazy. I don't know if they still do that, but I mean, this wasn't all that long ago that
Sure,
I saw
yeah.
this on some, like Discovery Channel,
Right.
something.
So like, what was up with the fish bladder thing?
Fish bladders were used for filtering. I have never actually looked into this, but my guess is that it has something to do with the proteins in it. And what they do is they adhere themselves to other proteins in the beer and particulates in the beer, and so they basically weight each other down, and it makes it all settle, so it clarifies the beer.
Oh.
But now you can get the same effect with they call it Irish moss, but it's seaweed. Just dried seaweed. It does the same thing. It basically it almost like gelatinizes particulate in the beer, and then it kind of settles it out. It drops it to the bottom, so that way you don't have like hazy beer.
Gotcha.
Cool.
And that was something like when I first started brewing beers in the 90s, that did not happen. People didn't know about that. And then when I started brewing again in 2011, I think it was, then that was a thing. I don't know when it became a thing, but it was between those times. And I remember talking to one of the guys at the store, and I said, I haven't brewed since like 93. And he's like, oh, it's a lot different now. Yeah.
Wow.
He's like, you're going to be really surprised at what kind of beer you can produce.
Cool. So what do you guys think of this?
It's good.
Yeah,
I like
Yeah,
it.
I like
Elysian makes good beer.
they do. Yeah, and I like the I like being a nerd. I like the dragon graphic.
Oh, hell yeah, man. They always have like really cool graphics. I love the label for their pumpkin beer. Yeah, it's very Halloween.
Right. right.
Cool,
Yeah.
cool.
Right on. All right, so I think we're just about coming up to the end of our second episode. If you've listened this far, thank you very much. And if you listened to the first episode, thank you as well. We'll be back hopefully next week with a third episode. And we are Second Player Score. We are actually a band, and we play music sometimes when we're not doing all these other things. But check us out. We're on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, SoundCloud, ReverbNation, blah blah blah.
Spotify. We are on Spotify.
Yes.
You know,
Yep.
we love likes, we love follows, and we like people to listen to our music, and we love when we are on people's playlists.
We do. All right. So so thanks a lot, and we'll see you next time.
Later, everyone.
Peace out.
You've been listening to the Second Player Speaks podcast with Second Player Score.